Ryan's office revenge. Sign this resignation letter, or we terminate you immediately. Those were the exact words. After 23 years of dedicated service, I was given 30 minutes to decide. I chose resignation, but I wrote my own version. One carefully crafted sentence. 5 days later, their corporate attorney called at 7:43 a.m., voice tight with panic. "Mr. Sullivan, we need to discuss the precise language in your resignation letter." Joshua Morrison, the CEO, went completely silent when I explained what I actually meant. "My name is Patrick Sullivan, and I'm 51 years old. For 23 years, I served as Senior Director of Global Operations at Ascent Systems, a software development company based in Denver, Colorado, specializing in enterprise resource planning solutions for manufacturing companies. I started in March 2002 as a junior operations analyst, fresh from graduate school with my MBA from Colorado State University, earning $38,000 annually and living in a studio apartment that cost more than half my monthly income. By October 2025, my annual compensation had reached $185,000, plus quarterly bonuses, comprehensive benefits, and stock options I'd accumulated over 2 decades. I managed a department of 41 professionals across 3 continents. My division generated $58 million in annual revenue. I wasn't just another employee with a fancy title. I was the living archive of institutional knowledge that kept Ascent Systems functioning. When our CEO forgot critical details about a major client relationship, my phone rang. When finance needed historical data from 2005 that existed nowhere in current systems, they contacted me. When board members wanted explanations for why certain processes existed, I provided those answers. My email archives stretched back 23 years, meticulously organized. I maintained vendor relationships that predated most current staff members. I understood contract negotiations that happened before half our management team even graduated college. For 23 years, I was indispensable. Until suddenly, I wasn't. The problems began 8 months before that October confrontation. In February 2025, Ascent Systems was acquired by Dominion Corporate Holdings, a massive conglomerate valued at $11.4 billion that specialized in purchasing medium-sized technology companies, systematically eliminating expensive, experienced employees and replacing them with recent graduates who accepted far lower compensation without questioning anything. I'd witnessed this exact pattern destroy 3 competing companies in our industry over the preceding 18 months. I knew precisely what was coming. The acquisition playbook never varied. New management arrives making reassuring promises about stability and continuity. Then they systematically eliminate anyone earning above $125,000 annually, replacing them with fresh graduates making $65,000 who lack the experience to recognize they're being exploited. The acquisition finalized on February 14, 2025. Valentine's Day, how appropriately ironic. The new management team arrived February 22nd. Our new CEO was Joshua Morrison, age 35, Yale MBA, previously an executive at a startup that burned through $40 million in venture capital before collapsing spectacularly. He possessed 0 practical experience in enterprise software operations. The CFO was Timothy Brooks, 33 years old, formerly a senior consultant at Bain & Company, absolutely brilliant with financial modeling and Excel spreadsheets, but completely ignorant about how actual businesses operated on a daily operational level. The new CUO was Nicholas Palmer, 37, who'd been a vice president at Dominion Corporate for exactly 18 months and believed he understood everything about software companies because he'd once managed one for 8 months before it failed catastrophically. They scheduled a mandatory company-wide meeting for March 3rd at 10 a.m. Joshua stood in our main conference room, a space I'd personally designed when we relocated to this building in 2011, selecting every piece of furniture, negotiating every equipment contract, even choosing the specific shade of gray paint for the walls, and delivered the standard corporate acquisition speech I'd heard nearly word for word from 3 other companies. "We're incredibly excited about this partnership," he announced with rehearsed enthusiasm that fooled absolutely nobody with real corporate experience. "Nothing fundamental is going to change. We deeply value your contributions. Your positions are completely secure. Together, we'll achieve unprecedented success." Dominion acquired Ascent specifically because of the exceptional talent here, and we're committed to preserving that culture and expertise. I'd heard this identical speech before, delivered with the same false sincerity. When executives promise nothing will change, it means everything is about to change dramatically. I began updating my resume that very evening at 10:23 p.m., sitting at my dining room table with a glass of red wine. But I also started doing something else, something my father had taught me during his 32 years as a construction foreman fighting for workers' rights. I started documenting absolutely everything. Every email exchange, every process document, every contract clause, every vendor agreement, every client relationship detail, every policy, every procedure, every conversation that seemed remotely significant. I backed everything up to 3 separate encrypted external hard drives that I kept at home using military-grade encryption software. I'd learned this crucial lesson from watching other companies get acquired and gut their experienced staff. They terminate you, immediately lock you out of all systems, and suddenly you possess 0 proof of anything you accomplished or any leverage to negotiate reasonable terms. The termination started in March, exactly 4 weeks after the acquisition closed. On March 24th at 8:47 a.m., they fired 15 people, all over 42 years old, all earning more than $110,000 annually, all with multiple decades of experience. They replaced them within 6 weeks with recent college graduates making less than half the salary. Human Resources called it organizational realignment. I called it systematic age discrimination and wage theft. But I kept my observations private and continued documenting every single termination, every replacement hire, every meeting where age or compensation was mentioned as a factor. I recorded everything. In April, they began targeting me specifically. Small things initially, excluding me from meetings I'd attended for years. On April 18th, there was a quarterly strategic planning session I'd facilitated for 9 consecutive years. Suddenly, my calendar invitation was canceled. When I asked Joshua directly about this exclusion, he responded with casual dismissiveness. "Oh, we're bringing fresh perspectives to that process. We appreciate your past contributions, though." Past contributions. Like I was already gone. On April 29th, they reassigned 4 of my primary responsibilities to a 27-year-old manager named Daniel Williams, who'd been with the company for exactly 9 months and possessed absolutely no understanding of our legacy systems or the complex vendor relationships I'd spent years cultivating. Daniel was smart enough, but he didn't know that our primary database server required a specific restart sequence every Tuesday morning, or that our biggest client in Germany expected personal calls on their national holidays, or that the backup systems I'd implemented in 2018 were the only thing standing between us and complete data loss if the main servers failed. On May 15th, during a department-wide meeting with my entire team present, they openly questioned my decision-making abilities, implying I was out of touch with contemporary operational methodologies. "Patrick's approach has served us well in the past," Timothy said with that condescending smile young executives perfect in MBA school, But we need to modernize our thinking. Some of these legacy processes might be holding us back from achieving our full potential. Classic corporate intimidation tactics designed to make me quit voluntarily so they wouldn't have to pay proper severance. Make the target feel incompetent, outdated, unnecessary, death by 1,000 small humiliations. But I refused to quit. I continued showing up every day, performing my job flawlessly, documenting every slight, every exclusion, every undermining comment, every instance of disrespect. My personnel file was absolutely spotless. 23 years of outstanding performance evaluations, 0 disciplinary actions, multiple recognition awards, including Operations Excellence in 2015, Leadership Innovation in 2019, and Distinguished Service Award in 2022. They couldn't terminate me for cause, and they absolutely knew it. On June 27th, they attempted a different strategy. Timothy called me into his office at 4:45 p.m. on a Friday afternoon. Always a terrible sign. Friday afternoon meetings mean bad news. Patrick, we're restructuring operations to align with Dominion's global framework. We're eliminating your current position and creating a new role called Senior Operations Coordinator. You're welcome to apply for it, but the compensation is significantly reduced. $89,000 annually. I'd been earning $185,000 plus substantial bonuses. This represented a $96,000 pay cut for essentially identical responsibilities with a slightly different title. It was textbook constructive dismissal disguised as corporate restructuring. I smiled pleasantly and responded, "I'll need some time to consider this." Then I went directly home and called Jennifer Rodriguez, an employment attorney I'd retained in April when the warning signs became impossible to ignore. Jennifer had 28 years of experience specializing in employment law with particular expertise in wrongful termination cases involving age discrimination. She'd represented over 180 employees, disputes with large corporations, and maintained a success rate of 81%. She charged $450 per hour, and I'd already paid her $4,500 for 9 consultations. "They're attempting to force you out," Jennifer said when I explained the situation. "That compensation reduction offer is textbook constructive dismissal. Don't accept it under any circumstances. Wait for them to make the next move and document absolutely everything." I waited for exactly 38 days. During those 38 days, things got worse. They moved my office from the executive floor to a cramped space near the supply closet. They stopped inviting me to the monthly leadership dinners I'd attended for 15 years. They forgot to include me in the email chain about our largest client renewal, a $12 million contract I'd personally negotiated and maintained for 8 years. The final insult came on July 30th. They hired a 29-year-old operations consultant named Michelle Brown at $125,000 annually to assist with modernization initiatives. Michelle had 4 years of experience, no background in our industry, and a tendency to suggest changes to systems she didn't understand. Her first recommendation was to eliminate the Tuesday database restart protocol because it seemed outdated and unnecessary. I tried to explain why that protocol existed. In 2017, we had a cascading system failure that cost us $400,000 in downtime. The Tuesday restart prevents memory fragmentation that builds up over time, and Joshua cut me off mid-sentence. "Patrick, I appreciate your historical perspective, but we need to focus on forward-thinking solutions, not maintenance of legacy workarounds." That's when I knew they'd made their decision. They weren't just trying to force me out anymore. They were actively positioning my replacement. On August 4th at 3:15 p.m., I received the communication I'd been anticipating. Joshua's executive assistant sent an email. "Mr. Morrison would like to meet with you in conference room C at 3:15 p.m. today." Please make yourself available immediately. Conference room C, not his office. That meant witnesses. That meant official business. That meant termination. I printed out my resignation letter, the one Jennifer and I had drafted 4 weeks earlier after multiple revisions. We'd spent 6 hours on a video call going through every single word, every comma, every potential legal implication. The letter was 1 sentence. 42 words that would change everything. I folded it carefully and placed it in my jacket pocket. Then I walked to conference room C. At exactly 3:15 p.m., Joshua, Timothy, Nicholas, and Catherine Wilson from Human Resources were already seated on 1 seats of the long mahogany conference table like a panel of judges evaluating a defendant. 4 leather portfolios arranged in front of them. 4 matching pens, 4 matching expressions of false sympathy. Joshua gestured toward the chair positioned across from them, the defendant's chair isolated, facing the prosecution. I sat down calmly. I'd mentally rehearsed this exact moment at least 60 times. "Patrick, thank you for making time to meet with us," Joshua began with forced friendliness. "We need to discuss your future with Ascent Systems." The moment of truth had arrived. "Patrick, thank you for making time to meet with us," Joshua began with forced friendliness. "We need to discuss your future with Ascent Systems. Translation, we're terminating you. As you're aware, we've been restructuring to align with Dominion's operational framework. We've made some difficult decisions about our leadership structure moving forward. After extensive consideration, we've decided to move in a different direction with the operations role. Translation, you're fired, and we're hiring someone younger and cheaper." I said nothing, just waited. Jennifer had coached me extensively. Let them talk. Let them make their threats. Observe everything. Stay completely calm. Timothy jumped in, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "This is obviously a difficult situation, Patrick. We recognize your years of service, but we believe it's best for everyone, including you, to pursue new opportunities elsewhere. We're prepared to offer you 2 options." He slid a manila folder across the polished table. Inside were 2 documents, both already prepared, just waiting for my signature. "Option 1, Timothy continued, you resign effective immediately. We'll provide 3 weeks of severance compensation. That's $10,673 plus your accrued vacation time. We'll provide a neutral reference. Clean break, minimal complications. You leave with dignity intact. 3 weeks of severance after 23 years. That was deliberately insulting. Colorado law didn't require any severance at all, and they knew it perfectly well. They were counting on me being too frightened or too exhausted to fight. "Option 2, Nicholas added with barely concealed smugness. We terminate you for restructuring purposes. You receive nothing. No severance payment, no vacation payout, nothing. And we note in your employment file that your position was eliminated due to redundancy, which doesn't create the most favorable impression for future employment opportunities. That was a threat. A clumsy, obvious threat, but a threat nonetheless. They were telling me, take the pittance or we'll make it harder for you to find work elsewhere." I opened the folder. Inside was a pre-written resignation letter on company letterhead. All I needed to do was sign at the bottom. The letter read, "I, Patrick Sullivan, hereby resign from my position as Senior Director of Global Operations at Ascent Systems, effective immediately. I understand that I will receive 3 weeks of severance compensation and accrued vacation time as my final settlement. I release Ascent Systems and Dominion Corporate Holdings from any and all claims related to my employment or termination thereof." It was a trap. If I signed that document, I'd be waiving all my rights to pursue legal action for age discrimination, constructive dismissal, or wrongful termination for $10,673. I looked at all four of them. Young, confident, absolutely certain they'd backed me into a corner with no possible escape. Joshua, checking his smartwatch. Probably had dinner plans at 6 p.m. Timothy smirking slightly, clearly enjoying his perceived power. Nicholas leaning back in his chair like this meeting was already concluded, and he'd won decisively. I thought about my father, who'd spent 32 years as a construction foreman, fighting for workers' rights, often against impossible odds. He taught me one critical lesson when I was 15 years old and got my first job at a retail store. Never sign anything without reading it 3 times, and never let people in expensive suits bully you just because they have fancy titles. You have rights. Know them, use them. I'll resign, I said calmly. Relief flooded their faces immediately. Joshua actually smiled broadly. Excellent decision, Patrick. Very professional of you. If you could just sign right. Here. I'll write my own resignation letter, I interrupted. The smiles faltered slightly. Well, we've prepared one that covers all the necessary legal— I'll write my own, I repeated firmly. Unless you're planning to dictate what specific words I'm allowed to use in my personal resignation letter. Joshua hesitated. He couldn't force me to use their letter without admitting this entire process was coerced. Fine, write your own. We need it by end of business today. 5:00 p.m. You'll have it within 1 hour, I said, standing up. I walked out of conference room C at 3:37 p.m., leaving them sitting there with their pre-written documents and their matching pens and their false victory. I went back to my office, closed the door, locked it, and opened my laptop. I'd actually already written my resignation letter 4 weeks earlier during a sleepless night when I knew this confrontation was inevitable. I drafted it with Jennifer's expert help. We'd spent 6 hours on a video call going through every single word, every comma, every potential legal implication. The letter was 1 sentence. 42 words that would either save my career or destroy it completely. I read it for probably the 75th time. I hereby resign from my position as Senior Director of Global Operations at Ascent Systems, effective upon receipt of complete settlement of all compensation, benefits, stock options, and other amounts owed under my employment agreement and applicable law. I sent it to Jennifer via encrypted message. They just delivered the ultimatum. Resign or be terminated. Is this still our strategy? She replied in under 2 minutes. Perfect timing. Send it exactly as written. Don't add anything. Don't explain anything. Just that 1 sentence. Then wait. I printed it on Ascent Systems letterhead. I signed it with my full legal name in blue ink. I made 4 copies. 1 for human resources, 1 for my personal records, 1 for Jennifer, 1 for my safety deposit box. Then I walked back to conference room C at 4:17 p.m., exactly 40 minutes after I'd left. Joshua, Timothy, Nicholas, and Catherine were still there, now with coffee cups in front of them, probably celebrating their perceived victory prematurely. I handed Joshua the letter without speaking a word. He skimmed it quickly, barely reading. Fine. This is acceptable. I'll need all the severance details in writing, I interrupted, including exact amounts, payment timeline, and specific confirmation of what's included. Timothy rolled his eyes in that condescending way young executives do when dealing with people they consider beneath them. 3 weeks' salary, we already told you. $10,673. It'll be in your final paycheck. And my accrued vacation time. I have 138.5 hours. Fine. That's included. And my outstanding expense reimbursements. I submitted receipts for $4,187 from the client meeting in Boston last month that hasn't been processed yet. We'll include everything, Nicholas said dismissively, already standing up to leave. You can go now. HR will contact you about returning your laptop and access credentials. I left. Walked out of that conference room at 4:24 p.m. on August 4th, 2025. They had no idea what they'd just accepted. I went to my office, packed my personal items into 3 cardboard boxes. Photographs of my family, my coffee mug from a conference in 2014, a desk plant my team had given me for my 20th anniversary, my favorite fountain pen that had been a gift from a mentor. My phone was already buzzing with text messages from my team asking what happened, but I didn't respond to anyone. Jennifer had been absolutely clear. Radio silence until they figure it out. Don't explain. Don't clarify. Don't respond to anyone. I drove home at 5:04 p.m., set the boxes in my living room, poured a glass of wine, and waited. They figured it out 5 days later. Tuesday, August 9th, 7:43 a.m. My phone rang. Unknown number with a Denver area code. I answered on the 4th ring. Patrick Sullivan speaking. Mr. Sullivan, this is Mr. Sullivan. Matthew Thompson, General Counsel for Dominion Corporate Holdings. I need to discuss your resignation letter with you immediately. Are you available to talk? I sat down my coffee and smiled. Here we go. Of course, Mr. Thompson. How can I help you? There's some confusion about the language you used in your resignation. Specifically, the phrase, effective upon receipt of complete settlement of all compensation, benefits, stock options, and other amounts owed under my employment agreement and applicable law. Can you clarify what you meant by that? I opened my laptop to the detailed spreadsheet I'd prepared with Jennifer. 63 tabs, color-coded with supporting documentation for every single line item. Certainly, Mr. Thompson, it's quite straightforward. My resignation becomes effective when I receive complete settlement of all amounts owed to me under my employment agreement and applicable Colorado law. Until that settlement is received in full, my resignation hasn't taken effect, which means I remain an employee of Ascent Systems with all rights, benefits, and protections thereof. Silence. Very long silence. I could hear papers rustling, someone whispering urgently in the background. I'm sorry, Matthew finally said, his voice noticeably tighter. Can you repeat that? My resignation is conditional, Mr. Thompson. It's effective upon, meaning contingent upon, receipt of complete settlement. That's basic contract law. An event is effective upon another event when the first event doesn't occur until the second event is completed. My resignation doesn't become effective until you pay me everything you legally owe me under my employment contract and Colorado state law. More silence, more rustling, then, and what exactly do you believe we owe you? I'm glad you asked. Let me provide a detailed breakdown. I pulled up my spreadsheet. 63 tabs, thousands of hours of meticulous documentation. First, my base salary through the date of resignation. $14,230. Second, accrued vacation, time of 138.5 hours at my hourly rate of $88.94. That's $12,318. Third, outstanding expense reimbursements, $4,187. Those 3 items total $30,730. However, that's just the beginning. What do you mean, the beginning? His voice had gone up slightly. Fourth, my annual performance bonus for 2025. Section 6.2 of my employment agreement signed March 15, 2018, guarantees an annual performance bonus of 80% of base salary for meeting operational targets. I didn't just meet all targets, I exceeded them by substantial margins. Our operations generated $58 million in revenue this year, 12% above projections. The bonus is payable upon termination of employment for any reason. That's $148,000. I heard something drop on his end. Maybe a pen, maybe his coffee cup, maybe his jaw. Hold on, we need to review. Fifth, I continued calmly. My stock options. I have 48,000 stock options granted in my 2020 compensation package that vest immediately upon change of control. Dominion's acquisition of Ascent triggered the change of control provision. At current market value of $23,015 per share, those options are worth $1,200. The silence now was absolutely profound. I could picture Matthew frantically calculating numbers, his face getting progressively redder with each digit. Sixth, my severance package. Section 8.4 of my employment agreement, which I can email you right now if you'd like, states that if my employment is terminated without cause, or I resign for good reason within 24 months of a change of control, I'm entitled to 18 months of salary continuation plus benefits continuation. That's $277,500 in salary, plus approximately $28,500 in health insurance premiums and other benefits. You're saying we owe you over $1.6 million. His voice had gone up a full octave. $1,608,435 to be exact. Plus interest accruing at the statutory rate of 8% annually per Colorado Revised Statute Section 1321(101), calculated from August 4th. And since my resignation hasn't become effective yet, I'm still technically employed, which means I'm still accruing salary at my daily rate of $700. Still covered by company health insurance, still entitled to all benefits and protections of employment. This is absurd. You can't... Actually, Mr. Thompson, I can, and I did. I consulted with Jennifer Rodriguez at Rodriguez Employment Law. She's argued 4 cases before the Colorado Supreme Court on employment contract interpretation, winning all 4. Conditional resignations are perfectly legal in Colorado. You forced me to choose between resigning or being terminated. I chose resignation, but I made it conditional upon receiving what I'm legally owed. You accepted my resignation without reading it carefully. That's your mistake, not mine. We'll fight this in court. You absolutely should, I said pleasantly. Take it to court. Because I have 23 years of documentation showing systematic age discrimination, constructive dismissal, and wrongful termination. I have emails from Joshua Morrison dated May 8th explicitly discussing getting rid of expensive older employees. I have recordings of meetings where Timothy Brooks discussed replacing me with fresh young talent. All admissible, all time-stamped, all backed up in multiple secure locations. He hung up without saying goodbye. On September 3rd, 2025, at 1:18 p.m., I received a wire transfer for $1,671,885. The full settlement plus attorney's fees. Same day, FedEx delivered a signed letter of recommendation praising my 23 years of exemplary service. The epilogue is deeply satisfying. Joshua Morrison lasted exactly 7 more months before being fired for missing quarterly targets by 29%. Timothy Brooks quit in March 2026. Nicholas Palmer is still there, managing a company that's hemorrhaging clients because nobody remembers how to maintain the systems I built. As for me, I'm semi-retired at 51. I do occasional consulting work, charging $575 per hour. My specialty has become career defense planning, helping experienced employees understand their contracts and protect themselves when management tries to force them out. I've helped 19 different people in the past year, all facing similar situations. The lesson here isn't about being vindictive. It's about understanding that when you work somewhere for 23 years, when you build systems and relationships and institutional knowledge, You have value that can't be easily replaced. When a company tries to discard that value for pennies on the dollar, you have every right to demand what you're legally owed. Never sign anything without reading it 3 times. Never assume corporate executives are smarter than you. And always know what your employment contract actually says. Sometimes the best victory isn't getting revenge. It's simply getting exactly what you deserve while teaching others that experience and knowledge have real, measurable worth that no spreadsheet can capture.